Welcome to In Support of Families. This is Emily Penrod, and I help you as a parent go from frustration, stress, and overwhelm to calm, confidence, and joy so that you can achieve the quality of family life that you desire. That's what I want for you. And I'm excited for this episode. This is the second in our series on communication. And I will be interviewing Rosalind Sedacca. And she is a divorce and co-parenting coach, recognized as the voice of child-centered divorce. She's the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, which provides valuable resources for parents who are facing, moving through, or transitioning after a divorce. She's also the author of How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce? A creative storybook guide to preparing your children with love. And she is the co-host of Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living radio show and podcast. Rosalind is an expert blogger for numerous divorce, parenting, and dating websites and blogs, and wrote numerous ebooks and e-courses on co-parenting and success strategies for parents. Rosalind, welcome.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
And I am really curious to hear your story of how you founded the Child-Centered Divorce Network.
Oh, well, thank you. I was married for close to 20 years, and the marriage was getting more and more difficult for me. But I stayed in the relationship, as so many people do, because I had a son, and he was 11 at the time, and I just didn't want to emotionally scar him. So for several years, I stayed in the relationship and went to therapy and worked on different ways of making life better. But my son started showing signs of stress, tension, headaches, and other things because there was conflict at home. And finally, I made the huge decision that I needed to divorce, that life would be better for me, for my ex, and for my son if we were living in two separate homes. And so I made that decision and made that declaration, and I stayed up for weeks and weeks of sleepless nights trying to figure out how to break the divorce news to my son. This was back in the 90s, and it was much less information, good information available at that time on any of these topics. And finally, one night, literally at 4 o'clock in the morning, I came up with an idea that really sounded sound. And I put that into practice and created what I call a storybook. It was a photo album with family photos and text that I wrote to tell my son the story of life before he was born, life in the years that he was growing up, and that there's a past and there's a present and there's going to be a future, and life is going to go on okay, even though there's going to be these changes in the form of our family. And it was a difficult conversation, but I came up with 6 key messages that children need to hear, put it together, and it was a very effective tool. And it got my ex and I together on the same page to start the process so we could understand the most important thing that we had in common, despite the differences, was our love for our son. And I realized that that can make all the difference in the world if you focus on that between the two parents. So we did the divorce, we did the co-parenting, I raised my son, and one day out of the blue, when my son was in his early 20s, he came to me and he said, "You know, Ma, you and Daddy did a really good job with the divorce, and I just wanted to thank you, because most of my friends whose parents divorced either hate their parents or are very angry at them. And I think you guys were great." And I let out such a sigh of relief because I was holding on to so much guilt and anxiety about, did I screw him up and did I make the right decisions and all of that. And it was such a rewarding compliment to hear that from my son. And I started thinking about what I learned over the years and some of the insights that I had. And I realized that I had much to share with people about doing divorce in the best possible way. And ultimately, it became the catalyst for my founding the Child-Centered Divorce Network. And then I became a divorce and co-parenting coach and ended up creating several ebooks and e-courses and programs, all focused on positive divorce strategies and co-parenting successfully and ways of protecting the children before, during, and after divorce. And that's how I am now celebrating my 15th year anniversary in this universe.
I loved what you said about the storybook. Now, this sounds to me like it could include pictures of him from his story.
Oh, yes.
And then,
Yes, I include pictures of him from, pictures first of mom and dad before he was born, and then pictures of him from birth on, all the celebrations and holidays and birthdays and vacations and school activities right up to the present. And then I explained that mom and dad were having a lot of problems, and I'm sure he was aware of it because there was tension at home, there was fighting, there was conflict. And it was no surprise to him that we were aware of the conflict. And so I explained that mom and dad decided that life will be better for all of us and you'll have happier times alone with mom and happier times alone with dad if we're just living in two separate homes. But so much will still be the same. You'll still be in the same school, in the same neighborhood, go and have the same friends, and family members are still going to be around. But this is a change in the form of our family. We'll always be a family, but the form is changing. And it was very important to stress that change is a natural part of life. The seasons change, our hairstyles change, our grades in school change, our clothing and fashion change, sports teams change. So this is a change in the form of our family. And then I stressed, most important, that mom and dad will always be your mom and dad. And mom and dad will always love you no matter what, because children may very easily believe that maybe if I'm not a good kid, mom will want to divorce me in 2 years or something else, because their imaginations take them off in different directions. So it was very important to focus on stressing that life is going to go on in better ways because mom and dad are taking care of it. We're working on making things as smooth and easy as possible. And we are always there for you. We love you, you're safe, and we're going to make this the best possible experience for everyone. And then it was up to us as mature, responsible adults and parents to live up to that. And that's in my coaching, what I stress for the parents. I believe it's not divorce itself that creates scars and harms children. It's the parents' approach to divorce. It's the attitude and the mindset that they bring. And if they're mindful about the children that they say they love and want to protect, then they can make decisions that are positive every step of the way. And the children will not have to be dealing with the challenges that too often we see in the headlines of divorce done wrong.
I want to just comment on when you talked about the future. And I think that is the real trauma for children, not knowing what's going to happen.
Yes.
It applies to a major move as well. But that time to explain, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to work. This is when you'll have time with mom, when you'll have time with dad. And you assured him he's going to stay in the same school. I think that's huge, to give them that security.
Security is the word. Yes, security and comfort, because children think the world is falling apart, and understandably, no one's ever experienced divorce before. Most parents haven't, let alone innocent children. And so it's very important for us to be mindful of what the children are experiencing, and it's fear and anxiety. And the more you can let them know that they're safe, that they're being taken care of, that they're being loved, and that the most important things in their life aren't changing, they can adapt to the changes because they have that loving support. It's when the parents are not doing that, that the world just falls apart around them. And we have such dramatic and sad situations because parents are making choices that are not what I call child-centered.
I like that term. I love that term, child-centered. I have seen those unfortunate cases where it was almost like the parents were using their children as pawns to punish each other.
And
And
they are.
that is so harmful to children.
I agree.
So you founded this network 15 years ago,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you have not only used not only your own experiences, but you've been adding more research and studies.
Oh, yes. Well, becoming a divorce and co-parenting coach with certification and gave me a really strong background. But most of the certification is being a divorce coach. I decided to specialize in being a co-parenting coach because to me, that's the most important part of the entire equation. As we all know, if you divorce and children aren't involved, then regardless of how upset and angry you may be at one another, you could live the rest of your life and not see each other. And it's a totally different experience than when you have children because you have to see each other. Co-parenting is a lifelong experience and your children deserve the very best you could bring. So in the legal system, they talk about in the best interest of the child, but of course we know that that's abused so often and kids are used as pawns because parents' egos get in the way and they're not making conscious, mindful decisions. They're doing things more focused on getting back at the other parent, hurting the other parent, wounding the other parent. And so we have to start at the very, very beginning. So what I focus on in the Child-Centered Divorce Network is catching parents as early on as possible when they're just contemplating the divorce. They're not even sure. We always encourage families to stay together and keep the marriage intact if we can. That's always top priority because no one's encouraging divorce. But if divorce is the direction that they're going, and in some cases it really is a healthier decision than staying in a toxic relationship, then we have to help the parents understand that you may hate everything about each other, but the one thing you have in common is those children. And those children deserve the best that you have. And that brings us to communication skills that focus on the well-being of the children. And one of the worst things that parents can do is fight around the children. Studies have shown repeatedly that conflict of any kind around children changes who they are. It affects their brain, it affects their psyches, it affects their nervous system. They don't know how to handle it. Adults have enough trouble handling it. And so it's very important to keep conflict away from kids. That means not only in person, but on the phone, in the other room. My parents used to fight. My parents didn't get divorced. They stayed together for the sake of the kids, as so many people did in that generation. And they had a miserable, toxic marriage. And I was very scarred and wounded by the conflict and the pain in that divorce. I believe my parents should have divorced. So it was the pain in their marriage is what hurt me so much. And I believe they should have divorced because being around that was not good for me and my sister in any way.
It is a tough decision, but you're right. All factors need to be concerned. Studies have shown that if the family can stay together, that is the best. That is the healthiest environment to raise children in. But if there is constant conflict, marital violence, they really are, that is not best for them.
Right, it's not supporting the children. So in addition to the conflict, one of the other real big mistakes that too often we see is parents bad-mouthing one another to the children. It's so tempting. You feel justified. That other parent is a real SOB. They hurt me. They did things to me and they abused me. And so it's so easy to make fighting comments about the other parent to the children, or rolling your eyes, or body language, just the way you talk about, or saying something, that's a stupid thing to do, just like your father. It's very simple to do that, and parents don't realize that it hurts and scars and damages children, because children innately love both parents. Unless a parent is extremely violent and vicious, the children will love both of those parents, and they don't want to hear the drama and the stories that the parents have to tell. So it's harmful to talk about addictions and other behavior problems that the parents had and to put them down. But it happens very often, and kids don't know how to react. They don't know what to say. They feel guilty for loving the other parent, who may be a wonderful parent to them. So it puts them in an awkward situation. So at the Child Centered Divorce Network, my goal is to explain to parents what these experiences are like for children of different ages and stages, so that they can vent to your friends, vent to family members, vent to a therapist, to a divorce coach. Don't vent to your children about how bad their other parent is, because there's nothing children can do to fix your problems anyway. Why burden them with that emotional information that's so painful and harmful, and it scars them? So we want to be very aware of all this.
Yes, children can be so sympathetic, empathetic towards their parents. It's tempting to use them for comfort, for
Yes.
you're confident when, but just as you wouldn't burden your children with the financial stress of the parents are to be the adults of the home. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally agree. And and they have to remain that way even when they're going through deep emotional challenges, because the bottom line is we don't want our children to be parenting us. And when we make some of these mistakes, that's what happens. The children get very empathic, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be the little man in the house, mommy. Don't worry about anything. I'm going to grow up. I'm going to take care of this. It's not children's place. So that brings up another very important mistake that we see too often that shouldn't happen. And that is turning your children into confidants. My mother did that to me, even though she stayed married and not divorced. She just told me terrible stories about my father and his family and all these things that I didn't want to hear at 8 and 10 and 12 years old. It immediately robs you of your childhood innocence. Suddenly you know things that only adults should know. And children's brains, even teenagers, their brains are not developed to be able to handle adult information. What do children know about unraveling adult conflict problems? The adults couldn't figure it out. It's so unfair, but that's what happens. And again, the parents do it innocently very often. They're not always intentionally doing that. They don't understand the consequences for the children, but it's our job to remind them and let them be aware of that, because once a child is hurt in that way, they can't unhear, they can't undo that information. The damage is done. And suddenly they feel guilty for loving the other parent, and they feel guilty for not defending and supporting the other parent, and they feel guilty for not protecting the parent who's telling them this. It's a no-win situation. There's nothing that they can do that's going to unravel it in an effective way. And that's why, thank God, we have coaches and therapists and professionals who parents can turn to, not your children. So don't turn your children into confidants. And also related, don't turn your children into spies. It's very easy to say, what did daddy's girlfriend do? What did mommy make for dinner? What did she order at the restaurant? And of course you want to have innocent conversations about things with your kids, but kids pick up. They know when you're pulling for information, when you're judging, when you're getting them to reveal secrets. And very often they're uncomfortable. They don't know what to say to you. Sometimes they'll lie to protect you. Sometimes they'll lie to protect the other parent, because kids will take sides, especially as they get older. Another one of those no-win situations where the kids are just put in an awkward situation where they're being stuck in a reality that they don't belong in. So using them as spies is painful and difficult for kids. And also don't let them become messengers. messengers in the sense of, tell daddy I'm going to be an hour late on Tuesday. Well, maybe your child forgets. Maybe your child confuses the message and gets it mixed up. Suddenly they're the bad person. Suddenly they're responsible for what you're trying to convey, as opposed to text or email or using one of those online scheduling tools that are so available. There are adult ways of dealing with those communication skills without putting the responsibility on children. Children have enough burden going through childhood without adding the challenges of divorce to their realm, don't you think?
Yes, so it really comes down to, don't put adult responsibilities on your children. And that's true in any case. My mother's mother passed away when she was young, and her father remarried, and she remembered that she would go to visit her aunts and uncles, and they would be saying, so what did she do this time? And there was,
Yes.
just in any situation, we don't put those adult responsibilities on our children. Children tend to blame themselves
That's
when
right.
there's a divorce anyway.
That's right. Yes.
I really like how most people think of, you need help before and during, but I love the way you stress and after. Talk about that a little bit.
That's so important, because so many people, when they're dealing with divorce, and it's a huge, complex legal, financial, emotional mess, and they think, when I get through the divorce and everything's about the divorce, which may take months, and in some cases it spreads out to even years, but the divorce is going to end, and that's not the end of the situation. If you're a parent, it's just the beginning. You're co-parenting for the rest of your life, and if you make decisions that are callous and insensitive and lacking compassion for your children and for your co-parent and for yourself, then how are you going to handle the birthdays and the graduations and the holidays that are coming up, and the children getting married and becoming grandparents, all of those things that we've all heard of situations where parents can't be in the same room for 2 or 3 hours to attend a wedding or a graduation. Shame on those parents. Shame on them, because who pays the price? Those innocent children who have to figure out how to have the room set up so mom and dad can't be seen in the same place at the same time. You have to be mature about these things, and you have to value and respect and honor your children, because again, they're innocent. It's never a child's fault when you get a divorce. Even if you're fighting about the kids, it's not their fault. And
I love that point. That is so true.
And we have to remember that we're parents first and divorcing second. We're always parents first. So the rules that apply to sound, healthy parenting apply to sound, healthy co-parenting. It's the same thing. The form has changed a little. There's a little more challenge in getting through the process, but once you figure out how to get the wheels rolling again, it's basic sound parenting. And if the parents are together and united in some of their decisions, the more they do that, the easier it is for the children. That's not always the way it turns out to be. But when we're using the kids as pawns, that's when the kids get into trouble, and the consequences are really dramatic.
I love that. I've heard you make the statement that you just decide, even if we can agree on nothing else, let's agree that we want what's best for our children. We just have like a minute left. Tell us how people contact you. How can they get more information?
Thank you. Childcentereddivorce.com, centered with an ED. So that's childcentereddivorce.com. Has a free ebook on the homepage and tons of other information, articles, and resources, as well as my coaching services and ebooks and e-courses. Everything is there. And in January, for International Child-Centered Divorce Month, there's a special website with free gifts, and that's a separate address. That's divorced with an ED, divorcedparentsupport.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rosalind. Thank you for joining us. Come back next week at the same time. I'll be interviewing Sandra McKechnie, and she is an expert on cultural awareness and double consciousness. We'll be talking about a broader scope of communication. This is Emma Lou Penrod with healingyourfamilies.com.